Peeps, in this video, I'm going to give you a little bit of history lesson. A little history lesson about some of the changes that have taken place over the course of time concerning the SDS or the MSDS sheets and how they relate to the health effects and toxicity studies. So first, what I want to say is that in 1980, OSHA, we keep seeing them happen over and over and over and over and over. I'm going to tell you that if you see a question in an assignment and it says, who's the managing responsible party for implementing this? If you don't know the answer, put OSHA, because almost every single time it will be. I'm going to say. Now, of course, you could get it wrong, but if you're going to take a wild guess, don't leave it blank. Put down OSHA, and chances are you might get close of getting it correct. But in 1980, OSHA wrote the Hazcom. Now, we've talked about Hazcom in a number of different areas, right? So this is something that's very familiar to us at this point, and Hazcom basically required that suppliers provide MSDS to chemical users. Basically, what this means is that if a company produces a product, a chemical, that chemical is then purchased by a laboratory, maybe, like us. When we purchase that chemical, we should also receive a material safety data sheet that comes along with that chemical. Now, chances are I could already have a copy of that MSDS sheet on hand, and if so, I just throw that away. But if I do not have that MSDS, this is a way that OSHA basically demanded that we would get the MSDS just in case to cover everyone's butts that work in a laboratory and that supply the chemicals. So, all laboratories, and I'm going to underscore all, because this includes any commercial laboratory that you might work at when you get a job making some profit, as well as academic laboratories, teaching institutions. We are all required, every one of us, to have MSDS sheets at the time. In 1980, that's when all of this came around. Now, we don't really talk about MSDS anymore, but this kind of gives us the laying foundation of what we're getting ready to talk about. So a little story here. Before I came to Cape Fear Community College, I had worked at another institution in Virginia, another community college. And that community college had no MSDS folders. And one of the things that I did when I first came in is that I looked around in the laboratory and I wondered where these MSDS sheets were. Well, no one had done it at any point in time, right? So for as long as the college had been open, since the mid-70s, this laboratory had never had an MSDS folder, period, point blank, never had them. So one of the things that I did going into it was to tell our administrators that we needed MSDS, we needed proper folders to put these MSDS sheets in, and that we needed a little bit of man hours in order to generate these MSDS folders that we had never had before. And that's exactly what we did. So it took us a couple of months in order to generate these MSDS folders. And then, would you believe it, that 2 months after we had finished, 2 months after we had finished, we get a phone call basically saying that we would like to have some safety inspectors on your campus, and we would like to go through all of your laboratory spaces to make sure that they are compliant. And one of the things that they were looking for were MSDS folders. And sure enough, we had them. So we abided by the regulation, and we did not get written up. All right. To improve the labeling and classification, though, in 1992, we get a change. And this is where our GHS system came into play. The GHS, we've seen that before too, are globally harmonized system for classification. I'm going to abbreviate that one. Classification and labeling of chemicals. So 1980, OSHA basically put a standard for the United States. In 1992, that's where other countries across the world began to get involved and began to say, how can we make this a little bit easier for everyone that wants to participate? And that is when the GHS system came around. More history. United Nations Conference on Environmental and Development adopted a mandate, and that mandate was to develop the GHS because they knew basically all of the good things that came from the GHS system, the agreement. So they wanted to develop the GHS. They wanted to put a little more focus onto this. And by 2000, the initial system was formed. Yes, we like the idea. Yes, we think this is great. Now let's put a focus on it and let's make it even better. And that's what happened in this step. The United Nations Conference on Environmental and Development, on the environment and development. The first edition of the proper GHS appeared in 2003. I'm going to call this the first edition. And it was known as the Purple Book, which is now why you see that I wrote all of these notes in purple leading up to it. But they knew that this was not perfect, right? Whenever you draft something the first time, it's like an English paper. Yeah, it's not going to be perfect. There's going to be things that you're going to change. There's going to be things that can be a little bit better. And that's exactly what happened here. So the first edition happened in 2003. It was a great step. It was kind of the first, let's reach our hands out across the world and let's make sure that everyone is on the same playing field. But we know that we're going to make it better, and we know there's going to be changes, and we know that we're going to have to update this as we go. Currently, there's been a number of different changes. 2005, 2007, 2009. Notice it was almost like every 2 years, right? 2003, 2 years later, 2005, 2 years later, 2007, 2 years later, 2009. That was by design. They wanted to implement rules, give it a year, see what worked, see what didn't work. The following year, go in, let's rewrite the rules, let's restate them, let's take this out, let's add this in, and then let's put out the new issuance of the rules and regulations. That's exactly what happened during these years. All right, well, from 2009, they kind of said, we feel pretty good about it, and there's nothing really major that we have to change anymore. So there was a skip. There wasn't really any major changes in 2011. That was great news. Wasn't needed. And then in 2013, 2 years after that, after 2011, right? So 2013, they finally make another revision. What they hope to do is they hope to kind of finalize this out, but they know nature of the beast. We're going to constantly be updating all of these rules and regulations as things change, right? But they want to get away from the every 2 years. They really would love to go years on end without changing anything at all. And that's what they hoped and kind of saw in 2011. Nothing really major had to have happened in those years to make any major changes in the Purple Book. So, the GHS system, what happens is that it now includes all requirements for an SDS sheet and for hazard ratings. That's one of their goals. So you, as a user of chemicals, can go in You can pull up a SDS sheet, and a organization has taken a look at what information needs to be involved in the SDS sheet. And they have basically put mandatory rules and regulations stating that these are the things that need to be involved in these listings. If you do not put any of these statements in the listing of the SDS, then you are in violation. The same way with hazard ratings. How bad is bad? Is it a health hazard? If so, how bad of a one is it? Is it a flammable hazard? If so, how bad? We have to relay that information to a worker. We have to relay that information to you as the user. So these people are kind of on your side. But I want you to keep in mind that, like many things, too much can be too much. Too many cooks in a kitchen can be a disaster. And just like with many different government agencies, too many rules and too many regulations will begin to crumble the foundation of what these things really started out to accomplish. All right. So with that said, that's where this video is going to stop. This is a little bit of history that leads us up to basically the current SDS sheet that we would see in a laboratory at this particular time. So in the next video, what we'll do is that we'll talk a little bit more about the GHS, the global harmonization. And we'll talk about maybe some countries that are involved and a little bit more detail about the GHS organization. And then we'll continue on and take a look at an SDS sheet or an MSDS sheet if that's how you have accustomed yourself to remember them.